what's up? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Ivy, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of 2020. Before I get into my favorites list, I'm going to have two honorable mentions. One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. I don't really want to tell you much about this one other than 5 high school students walk into detention and only 4 come out. This book is on here because I honestly don't read mystery like ever. This was probably the only mystery that I read this year. Actually, no, that's not true. This is one of 2 mysteries that I read this year. Because of that, it wasn't the most mind-blowing thing I've ever read, but since I, never read mysteries, I enjoyed the heck out of this one. I really, like I said, don't want to tell you too much about it because mystery books, you're supposed to figure everything out for yourself. But I highly recommend it if you're just looking for a fun time. Yeah, it was good. Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. This is the 3rd book in a Shadowhunters trilogy. This is the Dark Artifices trilogy. Basically, I read, most of the Shadowhunters books this year. Since I read so many Shadowhunters books, I only allowed one of them to be on, my favorites list, but I put Queen of Air and Darkness in here as an honorable mention because it deserves it. This is just such an epic conclusion to the Dark Artifices trilogy. I loved it so much. There are so many well-developed characters and relationships at this point because the Shadowhunters Chronicles has been going on forever. The more complicated and the more time I spend with certain characters, the more I'm gonna love them. Another thing about Queen of Air and Darkness is how the storylines are so intricate and it so beautifully and masterfully weaves all of these threads together into one cohesive picture in the end, and it's so mind-blowing to have read all these books and kind of have it all come together. At the same time, it is setting up the next trilogy, The Wicked Powers, so well, and I love that about it. Alright, so now for the top 4 books that I read in 2020. It's really bothering me that it's top 4 and not top 5, but I felt like these 4 were just on a completely separate level than any of the other books I read this year, so it's my top 4, okay? I can do whatever I want. These are also in the order that I read them this year, not the order of enjoyment. First, we have The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. So if you don't know, this is a story about a girl who is growing up in Nazi Germany. It has a very unique narrative style. I don't want to give it away because that is part of what makes this book so great. It definitely takes some getting used to, this type of storytelling, and also the perspective that it's from is a little jarring, but once you get into it, it's fantastic. For this book and for what it is, the slow pacing worked so well because it's basically just about life, It's about this girl, her everyday life, what she's going through, and the pacing, I think, was done well. I mean, it was definitely slow at times. I wouldn't have it any other way because I think faster pacing would have kind of ruined the atmosphere. Another thing that I love about this story is that it never shies away from the tough subjects, from the darkness, from the sadness. It really just is a sad, sad, sad and intense book. And I love it for that. I know that makes me sound like a psychopath, but I just love it when books kind of tell it like it is instead of sugarcoating everything. There's definitely no sugarcoating in this book. That being said though, this book is very dark and very intense, but I also really appreciate how much it pays attention to the good as well. It makes sure to take time to recognize all the good that is in this story, all the love and the light, despite all the darkness. And that's really, in my opinion, one of the main points of this book, is that even as all this terrible stuff is happening around this girl, Liesel, there's still light that she has and that she can hold on to. It's filled with family and friendship and love, and at the time that I read this book, I had never in my life cried as much as I did while reading this book. That actually changed later this year because I kept reading books that kept making me cry really hard. But this was the first book that I had to put down and step away from because I was crying so hard. I think that everyone should read this in their life because it's incredible. It is excellent. It is a classic, obviously, I guess more of a modern classic, but still a classic. One day I want to reread it, but I'm definitely not ready for that yet. Alright, so next I have The Lord of the Rings. We're gonna count this as one book. This is the epic fantasy that started epic fantasies. There's a hobbit named Frodo Baggins, and he is in possession of a very powerful and dangerous ring, and because of that, at the start of this book, he is being hunted by scary things. He has some help from some other people along the way, and he may or may not go on an epic quest, and it's so good. Why I love this book, that's a really, really long explanation. I hope you're ready. The writing is phenomenal. It is so beautiful, and people who say it is too slow-paced and too boring, to that I say, no. The writing is just so beautiful, and it does take some getting used to. Like, after reading, you know, YA stuff, nothing wrong with YA. I absolutely love YA, but after reading it for, like, ever and ever, going into this was like, oh my god, what is happening? But once you get used to it, it is the best experience. It's so immersive, it's so just, you escape, and it's beautiful, and I loved every minute of reading this. Middle-earth is the world that Tolkien created, and it's mind-boggling to me. It's so big, first of all. Like, there's maps, but then you discover that there's more maps, and it keeps going. It's gigantic. There's so much history, too. Like, the Silmarillion, y'all, I read that too this year. You would not even believe how intricate and detailed this world and its history is. The fact that there's not just one, but multiple original languages in here is just, I don't know. Like, he must have been an alien or something. I don't know how one person could possibly come up with all of this. The plot is great. I mean, it's simple enough to be able to just kind of sit back and enjoy it and follow along, and you get the gist of what's going on. But then, if you want to delve even deeper into it, you can get so complicated so fast, and I love that so much. The characters are so good. They're all so amazing and strong and just great people. I can't say human beings, but they're great people. In this book are some of the best written friendships I have ever read in my life. Frodo and Sam, Legolas and Gimli, Legolas and Aragorn, Merry and Pippin, the list goes on. It's just incredible. Their relationships, the loyalty that is in this book, man, it's, whew. I also discovered my new favorite character of all time, and that is Samwise Gamgee, because he is incredible, and I don't need to get into it right now, but just know that I love him with my entire heart and soul. And overall, in this book, there's just so much sadness, and you know, it's super intense and very dark at times, but through it all, there's always so much light and hope, and that's just what you get out of this book. When I was reading this, I just left with such a feeling of comfort and happiness and just hope, and that's what I want in a book. It made me, like, scared for the characters, it made me attached to them, it made me cry, but it also just made me so incredibly happy, and I love this book so much. I'm very glad that I discovered it this year because of everything that's going on. It was kind of like my way to escape from all the chaos of 2020. So the next thing on my list is actually not a book because I suck at these videos. It's actually a trilogy, and that is The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. This is a Shadowhunters trilogy, and it takes place in the Victorian era London. The first book, Clockwork Angel, starts out with Tessa Gray arriving in London and discovering that she might have some strange abilities, and she also finds out about this whole thing called the Shadow World. Also, if you do not know, Shadowhunters are basically these warriors whose job it is to protect Earth from demons. Where to begin? I'd say, at least in my opinion, that the plot of The Infernal Devices out of all the Shadowhunters series is probably the simplest, but I still really enjoyed it. Like, it was still really good. I mean, it's Cassandra Clare. We have the setting, which, as I mentioned, is Victorian England. It's so good. The atmosphere is perfection. But the best part is the characters. Never in my reading life have I ever seen anything like Hair and Grey Stairs. If you don't know, Hair and Grey Stairs refers to the relationship between three characters named Tessa Gray, William Herondale, and Jem Carstairs. It's, in my humble opinion, the best love triangle ever. I have not read that many books, but out of the books that I've read, I've never seen a love triangle done like this or done as well, because this is really the right way to do a love triangle, okay? The love and support and loyalty and the chemistry and the dynamics between these three characters is so fantastic. Every time they pop up in like other Shadowhunters books outside of their trilogy, like every time I see them, I'm like, oh my god, there's my favorites. It's unbelievable what Cassandra Clare did with these three people, these three fictional people who feel so real and who I love so much and who love each other so much, and you need to read it to understand. You have to. Because I grew so attached to these people, this trilogy completely destroyed me. I was on my floor reading the epilogue to Clockwork Princess, which is the last book in the trilogy, and I was sobbing my eyes out. I'm not going to tell you why, because obviously that would be a spoiler, but just know going into this that you will not be okay by the end. But I loved it, because something I learned this year is that all the books that make me cry end up on my favorites list. The last book on my list for today is 13 Reasons Why by J.R.R. I just wanted to start out by saying that I completely understand that there are a lot of people out there who do not like this book. They find it to be very problematic to them, and I just want to say everyone is entitled to their own opinions on this matter, obviously. I also want to give a trigger warning because this does deal with mental health and suicide, so if that is something that you are not keen on reading about, stay away from this book and maybe just stop watching this video right now. This book takes place over the course of one very long night. We are following a high schooler named Clare who is listening to these cassette tapes that he was left by a girl named Hannah Baker who committed suicide. If you haven't read this yet, please do not go into this thinking that it is a mystery or a thriller, because that is so not what this book is. I listened to the audiobook for this one, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do that as well. Essentially, when you're listening to the audiobook, it's like you're listening to the tapes with Clay. It's a great book for that format, and I was sitting in the back seat of my car. I was sobbing in the car with my family, and it was really awkward, but at the same time I didn't care because this book is so good. Honestly, this book is just about Hannah's story. I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to this subject, but I think that this book did a pretty good job of kind of showing how horrible it is for someone to go through this and how painful it is. It also, in my opinion, did a great job of showing the reader that no matter what you think, like no matter what you perceive about somebody, they could be going through something and you have no idea. I know that's super cliche, but this book is literally the epitome of that message. It's crazy. Another important lesson that I think this book teaches is that every single interaction that you have with other people, no matter how small, can have a huge impact on someone else, and you never know how big of an impact you can make. So obviously you have to be careful because you don't want to make a really bad impact like a lot of people did for Hannah. But Clay, by the end of this book, learns that small interactions can also lead to a very positive impact and that we need to do that more often. The ending of this book was fantastic. I thought it was so good. Obviously very sad and very devastating, but it was also hopeful. It left me feeling hopeful because Clay, by the end of this night where he's listened to these tapes, he's learned so much. And you see him change over the course of this night, and you see him realize that, he has to actively try to stop this from happening to other people after what happened to Hannah. So in the end, he starts doing something, and he's trying to make things better. He can't do it for Hannah, but he can do it for the next person. And I just think that the ending was so beautiful and so powerful. Alright, so that is it for today's video. I think I'm going to lose my voice after that. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time with another video. Bye.